11 signs it's time to let go of a relationship, even if it's family or friends. Stoic wisdom. 1. Stoicism and letting go, reclaiming your peace. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads holding on to a relationship, not because it's making you better, but simply because it's familiar? Maybe it's a long-time friendship or even a romantic relationship that has so much history you feel guilty even thinking about letting go. But deep inside, something doesn't feel right anymore. It's as if you're growing in one direction and they're rooted in another. That quiet discomfort, that tension you feel but can't quite name, that's your inner wisdom nudging you. Let's be real, it's hard to admit that someone you've shared memories with, laughed with, maybe even cried with, might not be meant to walk with you through every chapter of your life. That realization can hit like a thunderclap, sudden, jarring, and deeply unsettling. But it's also a necessary truth that opens the door to something powerful: freedom. This is where the wisdom of Stoicism steps in, not as a cold philosophy of detachment, but as a deeply practical guide for navigating the emotional storms of life. The Stoics understood something timeless: personal growth demands discernment. Not every connection is meant to last. Not every relationship supports the person you are becoming. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, and a Roman emperor, no less, wrote extensively about staying true to your principles and surrounding yourself with people who reflect the virtues you aim to cultivate. He didn't say to push people away out of judgment or bitterness, but to curate your inner circle with intention. That's powerful, isn't it? See, Stoicism isn't about isolation. It's about alignment, about choosing connections that uplift, inspire, and challenge you, not relationships that keep you anchored in fear, mediocrity, or old patterns you've outgrown. So if you're currently standing at that uncomfortable crossroad, wondering whether to hold on or let go, I want you to know, you are not alone. Today, we're going to explore how Stoic philosophy can help you make these tough emotional decisions with clarity, courage, and compassion. And if this topic resonates with you, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who might be quietly battling the same storm. Every moment of this conversation could be the exact spark you, or someone else, needs to break free and grow. Let's start with a very real red flag: a relationship that's stopping you from growing. Think about it. Have you ever felt stuck in life, like you're not making progress? And when you trace it back, it always seems to circle around a certain person? Maybe they don't cheer you on. Maybe they subtly, or not so subtly, discourage your ideas. Maybe they're not doing it on purpose. But that doesn't make the impact any less real. Seneca, another brilliant Stoic mind, was clear about this. Life is about growth, about stretching, learning, and evolving into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. And if someone, anyone, is making you feel smaller, dimmer, or more hesitant than you truly are, that's not love. That's limitation. Now, I'm not saying every relationship has to be some kind of motivational seminar. We all have hard days. We all need space to be imperfect. But the people you surround yourself with should be the kind of people who, even on your worst days, remind you of your worth and your potential. Take a moment right now, ask yourself, why am I still holding on to this relationship? Is it fear of loneliness? Is it loyalty to history? Or is it habit, just something you've grown used to, even if it no longer feels right? These are hard questions, but they're necessary. Because here's the truth: real connections, the ones that truly matter, don't just feel familiar. They feel empowering. They make you believe you're capable of becoming more, not less. In Stoicism, quality always outweighs quantity. It's not about how many people you know. It's about the depth and integrity of your relationships. The Stoics would advise us to be mindful of who we let into our emotional space. Because who we spend time with has a profound impact on the kind of person we become. So if you're in a relationship, whether it's a friend, a partner, or even family that feels more like quicksand than a springboard, it's okay to pause, to reflect, and maybe, just maybe, to let go. Letting go doesn't mean hate. It doesn't mean judgment. It means honoring your path, thanking them for the lessons, and choosing with intention to walk toward something healthier. Let's shift gears to another subtle but serious red flag: emotional turbulence. Have you ever noticed how some relationships feel like you're always in a storm? There's always drama, jealousy, passive-aggressive digs. The smallest comment turns into an argument. You leave interactions feeling drained instead of recharged. Sound familiar? Marcus Aurelius said something that changed my life. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Now imagine applying that to your relationships. What if the power to regain your peace started with recognizing how much emotional chaos you've tolerated from someone, and finally deciding you're done? This doesn't mean you have to live like a robot, emotionless, detached. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about mastering your response to them. And that mastery starts with awareness. If you're constantly feeling jealous, hurt, angry, or small around someone, you need to pause and ask, why? What are they triggering in you? And more importantly, are they trying to work through that with you, or are they feeding it? Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance. Not as a punishment, but as protection. To step back, regain your clarity, and choose your peace over your past. Because here's a fact, not every relationship is built to last forever. Some were only meant to last long enough to teach you something. And that's okay. We'll go deeper into that in the next part, where we'll talk about subtle manipulation and control, the Stoic view on freedom and autonomy, and how to tell if your relationship respects the most important person in your life, you. 2. Recognizing control and reclaiming your autonomy. Let's talk about something a little more hidden, but just as damaging: manipulation and control. You might not even realize it's happening until one day, you wake up and feel like you're not really you anymore. Like your choices, your voice, your direction in life have all been quietly edited by someone else. That's not partnership. That's possession. It could start subtly. Maybe it's always their way or the highway. Maybe your dreams are brushed off with a casual, "That's not realistic." Maybe your opinions are always the second draft in every conversation. And over time, you begin to shrink. You second-guess yourself. You wonder if maybe they're right, maybe you are too sensitive, maybe you should be more like the version of you they prefer. But here's what Stoic wisdom would ask: are you the master of yourself? Epictetus said it plainly: no one is free who is not master of himself. Freedom, to the Stoics, isn't about rebellion or isolation, it's about self-mastery. About knowing that your mind, your values, your choices are your own. When a relationship starts to chip away at that, it's not love, it's control. If you feel like you're constantly justifying your actions, explaining your worth, or suppressing your desires to keep the peace, I want you to ask yourself this: why? Why are you giving away your autonomy to someone who should be protecting it? The Stoic answer would be, you're not obligated to stay in a dynamic that costs you your freedom. And I get it, walking away is hard. Especially when manipulation is masked as love. I just want what's best for you, they say. But whose definition of best are we talking about? If it's not yours, then it's not love, it's control in disguise. This is where we apply the principle of rational discernment. The Stoics taught us to observe life with clarity, not through the haze of emotion or obligation. If someone's love demands you become someone you're not, if it asks you to ignore your instincts, give up your dreams, or abandon your values, then it's not love, no matter how warm the words sound. So what do? You start by getting clear on who you are without them. What do you value? What lights you up? What have you been pushing aside to keep the peace? Reclaiming your freedom doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision in the middle of the night. I'm not living like this anymore. And if you need a nudge, remember Epictetus again. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation? People might not get your decision. They might call you selfish or dramatic. But growth rarely comes with applause. It comes with courage. Let's now look at another tough truth. When relationships do more harm than good. We've all been there. That moment when you walk away from a conversation or visit with someone, and you feel drained. Maybe even worse than before. You tell yourself it's just a rough patch. But days become weeks, and the feeling doesn't go away. This is your intuition whispering what your logic is trying to ignore. Something isn't right. Relationships are meant to support us. Yes, even challenge us. But they're not meant to deplete us. And if being around someone makes you feel small, anxious, or constantly unsettled, it's time to look at that honestly. Marcus Aurelius spoke about harmony with nature, and part of that harmony includes your own nature. Your peace of mind, your emotional health, your energy. If a relationship is disrupting that consistently, that's not a small issue. That's a structural problem. And here's where Stoicism offers such clarity. The Stoics weren't cold, they were clear. They didn't avoid emotions, they just didn't let emotions make their decisions. They believed in observing life as it is, not as we hope it to be. So how do you apply that here? You observe. You ask yourself, does this relationship support my best self? Or does it slowly erode my joy, my focus, my peace? And then you act, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in alignment with what is true and right. That might mean setting a boundary. That might mean creating space. And sometimes, yes, it might mean walking away. This doesn't mean the other person is evil. Stoicism teaches us that people act according to their nature and level of understanding. But just because someone isn't toxic on purpose doesn't mean the relationship isn't toxic in effect. Let that sink in. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is let go. Free both of you from a cycle that's not evolving. From a connection that no longer uplifts but burdens. The Stoics teach us to live in accordance with nature. And sometimes that means growing apart. Seasons end. Chapters close. Not because you failed, but because you evolved. 3. Respect, dignity, and the foundation of healthy connection. Let's get into something essential. Not just important, foundational. And that's respect. Now I want you to pause and really consider this question. Is there mutual respect in your relationship? Not just tolerance. Not convenience. Not obligation. But actual, genuine, eye-to-eye respect. Because without that, everything else is just noise. The Stoics, people like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, weren't just obsessed with reason and virtue for no reason. They believed that a good life was built on moral foundations. And respect for oneself and others was right at the core of that foundation. When that's missing, you're not building a relationship. You're building a sandcastle waiting for the tide. Here's the thing. You can't have real love without respect. You can't have real trust without respect. And you definitely can't have a safe, nurturing space to grow if the person you're with sees you as beneath them, as a project to fix, or worse, as someone to control. And it's not always about what's said. Often, it's in the tone, in the subtle digs, in the way your ideas are dismissed, or how your concerns are brushed off. The sighs, the rolling eyes, the sarcasm that cuts deep, dressed up as humor. If this hits home for you, hear me out. This isn't normal. This isn't okay. And it's certainly not something you should just get used to. The Stoics believed that every human being has inherent dignity. That includes you. You were not put here to be talked down to. You weren't made to walk on eggshells or be someone else's emotional punching bag. Your worth isn't conditional. It's not up for negotiation. So if you're in a relationship, romantic, familial, or otherwise, where you're not being respected, it's not your job to convince them of your value. That's not love. That's emotional labor, and you don't have to keep doing it. And I hear you. Maybe you're thinking, but it's not always like that. There are good days too. Sure. Most relationships have highs and lows. But you've got to look at the pattern, not just the moments. Ask yourself, what's the emotional baseline here? Do I feel seen? Heard? Safe? If the answer is no, that's not something you sweep under the rug. That's something you confront, with honesty and with self-respect. Here's another Stoic perspective. Living in alignment with virtue also means not tolerating vice. Not in others, not in yourself, and not in your relationships. That doesn't mean cutting people off at the first mistake. It means paying attention to patterns. Respect isn't something that should have to be begged for. It's something that should already be there, present in how someone speaks to you, listens to you, honors your boundaries, and responds when they mess up. And let's not ignore the internal part of this. Sometimes we stay in disrespectful relationships because we haven't yet built that internal respect for ourselves. But Stoicism tells us this. If we truly believed in our own dignity, we'd stop entertaining people who constantly violate it. So where does that leave us? Start with a simple reflection. Do I feel respected in this relationship? Do I respect myself enough to walk away if the answer is no? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary. They mark the beginning of something deeper, self-reclamation. And here's a powerful truth the Stoics would fully endorse. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, by what you allow, and by what you choose to walk away from. Now let's go even deeper. Let's talk about illusion versus reality. Because a lot of times, we're not holding on to the person in front of us, we're holding on to the idea of them. The potential, the fantasy of what we hope the relationship could be, if only they'd change. Sound familiar? Maybe you've imagined the day they finally understand you. The moment they look you in the eyes and say, "I'm sorry, I get it now." Or maybe you replay memories from the good times, hoping if you try hard enough, you'll get that version of them back. But the Stoics would challenge that with a razor-sharp insight. Accept things as they are, not as you wish them to be. That's not pessimism. That's clarity. That's power. Stoicism invites us to live in accordance with reality. Because true peace can never be found in illusions. It's found in the courage to face what's real, even when it hurts. So what's the illusion you've been holding on to? Is it the belief that if you just try harder, you can fix things? That your love will be enough to change them? That one day, they'll finally become the person you always saw in them? Here's the harsh but liberating truth. That day may never come. And the longer you wait for it, the more of yourself you lose. The Stoics would say, let go of fantasies. Embrace the truth. Because in truth, there's freedom. When you see someone for who they really are, and not who you wish they were, you regain your power. You get to decide, with full awareness, whether this relationship serves your highest good. And if it doesn't, then it's time to release it. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the lessons. And with clarity for the freedom it opens up in your life. For, when values clash, the invisible line you should never cross. Let's talk about something that doesn't always show up early in a relationship, but once it does, it changes everything: values. Here's a question we don't ask ourselves enough. Am I compromising my core values in this relationship? Not preferences. Not little habits. Values. The deep stuff. The moral compass that directs your life. And if you're cringing a little bit right now, feeling like this might hit close to home, stay with me. This is the kind of uncomfortable reflection that leads to true freedom. Let's be clear, every healthy relationship requires some give and take. Maybe you're a morning person and they're not. Maybe you're neat and they're more laid back. That's normal. That's life. But values? Those are different. Your values are the non-negotiables, the beliefs that shape how you treat others, how you handle conflict, how you live, love, and show up in the world. Things like honesty, integrity, kindness, self-respect, loyalty, growth, purpose. When you start bending those, just a little at first, to keep someone around, it might not seem like a big deal. But those little compromises add up, and slowly you start feeling off. You start feeling like a stranger to yourself. You tell a white lie to avoid an argument. You laugh off behavior that goes against your principles. You ignore how uncomfortable you feel during certain conversations. You convince yourself, maybe I'm being too rigid, maybe I should just be more flexible. But inside, you know something's wrong. Here's what the Stoics would say about this. No relationship is worth the cost of your integrity. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, repeatedly reminded himself to live in alignment with nature, his virtues, his reason, his sense of justice. And Epictetus? He made it crystal clear. If something requires you to compromise your moral character, it's beneath you. Period. So what happens when the person you love or care about starts pulling you away from those values? What if they encourage you to gossip, to lie, to get even with someone instead of forgiving them? What if they undermine your spiritual beliefs, your sense of purpose, or your dreams, not with force, but with sarcasm, shame, or passive disapproval? It's subtle, but it's deadly. The Stoics believed that to live a virtuous life was the highest good. That meant constantly examining your actions, your motives, and yes, your relationships, to see whether they align with your principles. So let me ask you, what are you giving up just to keep the peace? What are you turning a blind eye to, just to avoid rocking the boat? And here's the hardest question of all, who are you becoming by staying? Because over time, you start to shift. You laugh at jokes you used to cringe at. You excuse behaviors you once swore you'd never tolerate. You lose track of who you were before the relationship began. That's not growth. That's erosion. Now I get it. It's not always easy to draw the line. Emotions complicate things. Memories muddy the water. You love them. You've built something. You've shared your heart. But love without alignment becomes torment. That constant tug-of-war between who you are and who you feel you have to be just to keep someone close? That's not love. That's emotional dissonance. And here's the Stoic response. You owe yourself a life of integrity. One where your values aren't compromised, but celebrated. One where your relationships reinforce who you are, not require you to edit yourself to fit in. Let me say this as clearly as I can. You don't need to change your core to be loved. The right people will love you because of your values, not despite them. They'll stand beside you as you live them, not make you feel guilty for honoring them. So if you're stuck in a relationship where you feel like you're always choosing between the relationship and your integrity, it's not the right relationship. And walking away? That's not failure. That's wisdom. That's self-respect. That's Stoicism in action. Let's zoom out for a moment and talk about something closely related: reciprocity. Because sometimes the value being compromised is the belief that relationships should be mutual, not one-sided. Have you ever found yourself always giving your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, while the other person just takes? You show up, you listen, you support, and when it's your turn, crickets. This isn't about keeping score. This is about balance, mutual effort, emotional equality. The Stoics believed that relationships, just like everything else in life, should be based on reason and virtue. That includes fairness, respect, contribution. It's not Stoic to enable someone else's laziness or entitlement. Seneca warned against pouring yourself endlessly into people who refuse to grow. He said, essentially, we must be generous with wisdom, but not at the expense of our own peace. So if you're always giving and rarely receiving, it's time to ask, am I being kind? Or am I being used? The line between those two is thinner than we think. True relationships don't drain you. They energize you. They create space for both people to rise, not for one to rise while the other withers. And if that's not happening, it's time to communicate, set boundaries. Maybe even step back and see what remains when you stop carrying the full emotional load. Because a relationship without reciprocity is not just exhausting, it's unsustainable. 5. Stoicism and the courage to walk away from abuse. This next part is tough. It's painful, but it's necessary. Because sometimes, the issue in a relationship isn't just emotional imbalance or lack of respect. It's abuse. And it comes in many forms. Not just physical, though that's the one we often recognize first. Abuse can be emotional, verbal, psychological, and all of it is damaging. All of it is unacceptable. And here's the thing. Abuse doesn't always look like fists or yelling. Sometimes it's the constant criticism that erodes your confidence. The manipulation that makes you question your own sanity. The silence that punishes you until you submit. The guilt-tripping that makes you feel selfish for wanting basic respect. Stoicism, at its core, is a philosophy of dignity and virtue. It teaches us that every human being possesses inherent worth. And that includes you. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, they all lived by a powerful principle. We are not to be slaves to anyone, not even emotionally. We are to be masters of ourselves, and that begins with refusing to remain in environments that degrade our spirit. Epictetus was born into slavery. He knew what it meant to be powerless. But he also taught that freedom begins in the mind, when you no longer allow others to violate your values or your peace. And staying in an abusive relationship, even one that's just emotional, is a slow erosion of that mental and emotional freedom. So let's be brutally honest. If you are in an abusive relationship, Stoicism doesn't ask you to endure it, it empowers you to leave it. Stoicism is not about passive endurance. It's about wise discernment. Knowing what to tolerate and what to reject. Knowing what aligns with your values and what violates them. And abuse? That's not a gray area. That's a red line. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. But what if it's not always bad? What if they're just going through a hard time? What if I leave and regret it? Those are valid fears. Abuse often plays tricks on your mind. It convinces you that you're overreacting, too sensitive, too demanding. But here's the truth. You are not too sensitive. You are not too demanding. You are not to blame for someone else's choice to harm you. You have the right to leave. You have the right to choose peace. You have the right to rebuild your life with dignity. And yes, it's hard. Sometimes terrifying. Especially if the relationship has lasted for years, or if children are involved, or if you've been financially or emotionally dependent. But you are not alone. There are people who can help. Friends, family, professionals, support groups, counselors, helplines. Even if it feels like you're in the dark, there is a way out. There is light. There is a future beyond this. The Stoic path is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about facing hard truths and acting on them. It's about reclaiming your power through clear thinking, moral courage, and unwavering self-respect. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, we must recognize when we are allowing ourselves to remain in harm's way, and make the decision to step out of that pattern. Leaving abuse is not failure. It's victory. A victory over fear, over guilt, over the false narrative that says, this is the best I can do. Because it's not. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve respect, not as a reward, but as your birthright. And walking away? That's not weakness. It's Stoicism in its most powerful form. Stoicism also reminds us that healing is possible. That once we remove ourselves from toxic environments, we begin the process of rebuilding, of reclaiming our inner freedom, of learning to trust ourselves again. Healing from abuse is a journey. It takes time, but you don't have to have it all figured out to take the first step. All you need is clarity of purpose and the willingness to say, I will not allow this to continue. Not one more day. And once you take that step, the Stoics remind us, you are never alone if you walk with virtue. There's strength in every small decision to honor yourself. So if this part of the message speaks to you, I urge you, don't just listen, act. Reach out. Get help. Protect your peace. That is not only wise, it's necessary. It's life-saving. And if you're supporting someone who's in an abusive relationship, remember, your presence, your belief in them, and your patience might be the lifeline they need. Be the calm in their storm. They may not see clearly now, but with your help, they can. 6. When words fail, Stoicism and communication breakdown. Let's talk about something we all wrestle with, communication. Or rather, what happens when communication fails. You know the feeling. You try to explain yourself, but your words land like stones. You want to listen, but what you're hearing doesn't make sense. You're both speaking, but no one is really understanding. And over time, this becomes the norm. Every conversation feels like walking through fog. Misunderstandings pile up. Resentment builds. And eventually, silence becomes safer than speaking at all. Now here's the Stoic take. Communication isn't just a soft skill. It's a virtue-driven act. Marcus Aurelius, for example, didn't just reflect on his thoughts. He also considered how he communicated them. He believed that we should strive to be clear, rational, and respectful in how we engage with others. Because for the Stoics, communication was about connection and self-mastery. So what happens when that connection is broken? The first thing Stoicism teaches us is, look inward first. Boys, ask yourself, what role am I playing in this breakdown? Am I truly listening? Or just waiting for my turn to speak? Am I clear with my words? Or am I assuming they should just get it? This kind of radical honesty with yourself is the first step toward resolution. The second step? Recognizing that some people aren't ready or willing to meet you halfway. And that's where things get tricky. Because not every communication issue is about technique. Sometimes it's about values, about effort, about emotional availability. And when someone repeatedly shows they're not willing to listen, to engage honestly, or to have hard conversations without blame or hostility, that's not just a communication style. That's a barrier. And here's where the Stoic principle of discernment becomes your guide. Epictetus taught that we should focus on what is within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our responses. But the responses of others? The way they process conflict? That's out of your hands. And if you've tried, really tried, to build a bridge, and it keeps getting burned down, maybe it's time to stop trying to cross it. It's not about giving up on people at the first sign of miscommunication. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's about being wise. Knowing when further effort will build, and when it will only drain. And let's be real, failed communication doesn't always look like arguments. Sometimes, it looks like avoidance. You bring something up, and they deflect. Or change the subject. Or make you feel guilty for even mentioning it. That's not miscommunication. That's emotional dismissal. And when that becomes a pattern, Stoicism invites you to reflect. Is this relationship helping me become better, wiser, more aligned with virtue? Or is it keeping me stuck in cycles of confusion and self-doubt? Communication is the lifeline of any healthy relationship. It's how we stay connected, how we resolve conflict, how we support each other. Without it, you're not in a relationship. You're in a guessing game. And the Stoics would say, life is too short to live in constant uncertainty, especially when clarity is within reach, if both people are willing. So what do you do when communication consistently fails? You start by trying. Speak clearly. Listen deeply. Create space for honesty. But if after all that nothing changes, you take the Stoic path. You accept what is out of your control, and then you act on what is. That might mean setting boundaries, or taking space, or even stepping away entirely. Because here's something we forget. The absence of communication is communication. It's a message. And often, that message is, this person isn't ready to meet me where I am. And that's okay. It doesn't make them bad. It just means the relationship in its current form may not be sustainable. The Stoics teach us that clarity brings peace. And peace begins with honesty. If you've been trapped in confusing communication loops for too long, ask yourself, what am I trying to preserve here? The relationship or the illusion of one? And here's a Stoic truth you can hold on to. It's better to be alone with clarity than together in chaos. Because from clarity, you can rebuild. You can reset. You can find relationships where words aren't weapons or walls, but bridges. Let's go one step further. Ask yourself, when I speak in this relationship, do I feel safe, heard, respected? If not, that's a major sign. Because safety in communication isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. Without it, you're not sharing, you're performing. You're not resolving conflict, you're avoiding it. And that's not a foundation, that's a trap. And if you're the one who struggles to communicate, that's okay too. Stoicism teaches us that we are always capable of growth. But that growth starts with willingness. If you're willing to do the work, ask questions, seek understanding, take responsibility, then communication can heal. But if you or the other person shut down every attempt to improve things, then maybe it's time to reflect on whether you're building something sustainable. 7. Peace or turmoil. The Stoic approach to emotional disturbance in relationships. Now let's talk about something we often dismiss until it's too late, your peace of mind. Let me ask you, how do you feel after spending time with this person? Lighter? Calmer? Grounded? Or are you walking away feeling like your nerves are frayed, your energy drained, and your thoughts in chaos? Because here's the truth, if a relationship is constantly disturbing your inner calm, it's not something to brush off, it's something to examine closely. The Stoics believed that tranquility of the mind was one of life's highest pursuits. They called it ataraxia, a deep, unshakable peace that isn't dependent on circumstances or other people. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to let others disturb his soul. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Now apply that to your relationship. If every interaction feels like walking into a storm, if drama, tension, or emotional volatility have become the norm, it's time to stop blaming yourself and start seeing the bigger picture. Because relationships are supposed to support your peace, not sabotage it. This doesn't mean you'll never have disagreements. Of course not. But conflict and constant emotional chaos are not the same thing. One helps you grow. The other keeps you in survival mode. And here's something to think about. What if the most loving relationship in your life is the one that's slowly robbing you of your sense of self? You stop doing things you love. You're always on edge, afraid of saying the wrong thing. You monitor their mood before you decide how to act. You feel more anxious than seen. That's not love. That's emotional captivity. Stoicism teaches us to return to reason, to look at reality with clear eyes. So take a step back and ask, is this relationship peaceful at its core, or am I always recovering from it? And if you find that you're spending more time recovering than connecting, you have your answer. Epictetus taught that we should never hand over control of our peace to anyone else. But we do it all the time in relationships. We tolerate passive-aggressive digs. We normalize volatility. We start thinking that walking on eggshells is just how it is. But Stoicism says otherwise. It says your peace is your responsibility, and protecting it is not selfish. It's wise. So what does that look like in practice? It starts with boundaries. Real ones. Not vague wishes. Boundaries that say, I will not tolerate being yelled at, or I won't keep explaining my worth. Boundaries that aren't about changing the other person, but about protecting your inner state. Next, it means observation without judgment. Don't just label the other person as toxic and shut down. Pay attention. What specific behaviors are causing the disturbance? How do they respond when you bring them up? Are they willing to grow with you, or are they offended by your need for peace? And if the answer is the latter, if your peace becomes a threat to their control, that's your signal. That's not a partnership. That's a power struggle. Here's a key Stoic insight. Peace isn't found by fixing others. It's found by aligning your life with what nourishes your soul. If your relationship consistently pulls you out of that alignment, it might be time to walk a different path. And look, I get it. It's not easy to let go, especially when there's history. Moments that felt like everything was right. But Stoicism reminds us, we can honor the good without denying the truth. We can be grateful for the memories and still recognize that the present is no longer sustainable. And the present is where you live, not the past, not the fantasy of what could be, but right here. And if right here is full of anxiety, dread, and emotional exhaustion, you owe it to yourself to choose peace. Remember, peace is not the absence of people. It's the presence of clarity, alignment, and boundaries. It's waking up without dread. It's feeling safe in your own thoughts. It's being able to breathe fully, deeply, freely. And anyone who truly loves you will protect that peace, not punish you for having it. 8. Without respect, there is nothing. The Stoic case for mutual dignity. Let's talk about something that seems so basic, yet it's the one thing that can make or break any relationship: respect. You can have chemistry. You can have history. You can even have love. But if mutual respect is missing, everything else eventually falls apart. Here's the thing: respect isn't just about politeness or manners. It's about recognition. The recognition of someone's worth, their dignity, their voice, and your own. Now ask yourself honestly, in this relationship, do I feel respected? Do you feel listened to? Do your boundaries matter? Are your dreams met with encouragement, or eye rolls and silence? Do you feel like an equal partner in the relationship, or more like a subordinate trying to prove you deserve kindness? It's a heavy question, but the Stoics would tell you, it's one of the most important questions you can ask. Because to them, respect wasn't optional. It was a reflection of virtue, of character. Epictetus said, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. Which means we hold ourselves to high standards, and we treat others with compassion. But that compassion does not mean tolerating disrespect. Disrespect wears many disguises. Sometimes it's loud, yelling, insults, dismissiveness. Sometimes it's quiet, sarcasm, constant interruptions, indifference. Sometimes it looks like control. Other times like apathy. But whatever form it takes, it sends the same message: you don't matter as much as I do. And that's not just painful, it's unsustainable. See, Stoicism teaches us that we are all parts of a greater whole. Marcus Aurelius viewed humanity as interconnected. No one is lesser. No one is superior, which means in a healthy relationship, we walk side by side. Not one above the other, not one pulling the other along, but together. So if you're in a relationship where your voice feels smaller, your needs feel like burdens, or your personhood is up for debate, that's not a communication problem. That's a respect problem. And here's the hard truth. You cannot fix that on your own. You can be kind. You can be patient. You can model respect. But if it's not reciprocated, if the other person sees your boundaries as threats, your values as flaws, or your individuality as inconvenient, then the foundation of the relationship is broken. And no amount of love or effort can build anything stable on a cracked foundation. So what do? You start with self-respect. Because Stoicism teaches that how we allow others to treat us often reflects how we see ourselves. If you respect yourself deeply, non-negotiably, then you'll naturally resist any relationship that asks you to tolerate disrespect. You'll say, no more, not out of anger, but out of clarity. That might mean a difficult conversation. It might mean walking away. But here's what it won't mean: continuing to betray your dignity just to keep the peace. Because that's not peace. That's self-abandonment. And I want to make this clear. Choosing self-respect is not selfish. It's not cold. It's not dramatic. It's necessary. Seneca wrote, "A wise person is content with themselves." Which means your sense of worth doesn't depend on someone else's validation. It doesn't rise or fall with someone's approval. It comes from within, and it's reflected in the relationships you choose to nurture. Let's look at this from another angle. What kind of environment are you creating with the other person? Is it one where both of you feel safe to be honest? To disagree without fear? To be vulnerable without being punished? If not, then there's no real intimacy, only performance. True connection thrives on respect. And if it's not there, you're not being loved, you're being tolerated. Or worse, controlled. And if you're on the fence, if you're still unsure whether what you're experiencing is disrespect, pay attention to the small things. The way they react when you succeed. The way they speak about you when you're not around. The way they apologize, or don't. The way they handle your no. Because respect isn't shown in grand gestures. It's revealed in consistent behavior. Now, I know it's tempting to make excuses. They had a tough childhood. They don't mean to be hurtful. They're just stressed. But here's the Stoic stance. Understanding someone's pain does not require you to accept their harm. You can be empathetic and still walk away. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from them. Because Stoicism is about integrity. And that includes refusing to participate in relationships that violate your values. So let me ask you again, do you feel respected? If not, don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it. Don't shrink to make room for someone else's ego. Instead, make room for your dignity, for your voice, for a life that reflects your values. And know this, mutual respect isn't a bonus, it's the bare minimum. You deserve nothing less. 9. Letting go of illusions, the Stoic way to see people as they are. Let's dive into one of the sneakiest traps we fall into, confusing someone's potential with who they really are. Have you ever found yourself thinking things like, if they just worked on themselves, they'd be amazing, or they weren't always like this, maybe the old version of them will come back? You're not alone. We've all done it. Held on to the idea of someone, rather than the reality. We see their best qualities and ignore the patterns. We romanticize a version of them that only shows up 10% of the time. We fall in love not with who they are, but with who they could be, if only they changed. But here's the Stoic truth. You can't build a relationship on a fantasy. Stoicism teaches us to embrace reality, to see the world and people clearly, without illusion, without wishful thinking, without denial. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed." And that's what this is about, seeking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means letting go of the story we've told ourselves. Because the story is seductive, right? They used to be different. They have so much potential. Maybe if I love them better, they'll grow. But here's what the Stoics would say: don't measure a person by their potential. Measure them by their pattern. What do they consistently show you? How do they behave when it counts? When they're angry? When you're vulnerable? When they're faced with responsibility? That's who they are. Not who they could be one day, but who they are right now. And you know what? People are allowed to grow. They're allowed to change. But that has to come from them, not from your hope, your effort, or your sacrifice. Your love can't substitute for their willingness. Your patience can't replace their accountability. Stoicism says, accept what is. Stop clinging to what isn't real. Because illusions cost you clarity. They keep you stuck. They keep you invested in a future that may never arrive. Imagine this: you're pouring time, energy, and emotional bandwidth into someone, not because of how they treat you now, but because of what you hope they'll become. Meanwhile, your peace, your joy, your growth are put on pause. You start shrinking to keep the illusion alive. That's not noble. That's not romantic. That's self-abandonment. And the Stoics would challenge that. They'd say, what if your peace of mind matters more than your projections? What if the most compassionate thing you can do, for both of you, is to accept the truth, that they are who they are? That this might be the full picture, not a preview of something better. And if that truth hurts, it's okay. You're human. You're allowed to feel disappointed. Grieve the dream. Grieve the version of the relationship you wished existed. But once you do, you'll get your freedom back. Because the reality is, when you stop chasing potential, you make space for something real. You create room in your life for relationships built on mutual respect, emotional maturity, and shared values, not projections or fantasies. And this doesn't mean the person you're letting go of is bad. Stoicism isn't about blaming. It's about clarity. It's about saying, this relationship as it is, doesn't align with who I am or where I'm going. And I accept that. That acceptance? It's not defeat. It's liberation. When you release the illusion, you begin to see more clearly, not just them, but yourself. You begin to trust your judgment. You learn to ground your relationships in reality, not romanticism. And here's the paradox: only from this grounded place can anything truly grow. Real change starts with truth. Real connection starts with honesty. So if you're feeling trapped by what-ifs and maybes, the Stoics offer you a lifeline. Let go of what isn't real. Embrace what is. Choose peace over potential. 10. When staying means losing yourself, the Stoics stand for integrity. Let's talk about one of the most silent and dangerous ways a relationship can erode your well-being. Not through loud conflict, but through slow, quiet compromise of your values. Ask yourself this: am I still the same person I was before this relationship began? Or have I started to lose pieces of myself just to make it work? It's subtle at first. Maybe you tell a small lie to avoid tension. Maybe you stop bringing up topics that matter to you because they always lead to eye rolls or criticism. Maybe you laugh at things you once thought were offensive just to avoid being called too sensitive. And over time, you begin to change. Not because you're growing, but because you're shrinking. Stoicism would call this a betrayal of virtue, and that's something it never supports. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That's not just a quote. It's a call to live with integrity even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. and when you're in a relationship that asks you to violate your core values. That's the moment when the Stoics would urge you to pause and reflect. Not with emotion, but with clarity. What is this relationship costing me, and is it worth the price? Your values are not accessories. They're your foundation. They define your decisions, shape your identity, and guide your path through life. Compromising them isn't just a relational issue, it's a spiritual and psychological wound. Because the moment you start tolerating what you once stood against, the moment you start excusing behavior you once knew was wrong, the moment you start betraying yourself to maintain someone else's comfort, that's the moment you start losing your own reflection. The Stoics weren't perfect, but they were relentless in their pursuit of moral clarity. Seneca warned about the danger of moral drift, that slow, incremental change where we wake up one day and no longer recognize our actions or our standards. He said, "No man becomes bad all at once. It's gradual, and often it happens in relationships. You justify the behavior. You ignore the feeling in your gut. You keep telling yourself, it's not that bad." But here's the Stoic question. If you have to compromise your character to stay connected, is it really a connection worth keeping? Now, to be clear, all healthy relationships involve compromise, but not of your core. You can compromise on routines, preferences, even timing, but never on who you are. And when someone pressures you to let go of your values in the name of love or loyalty, that's not love. That's manipulation. Love doesn't say, "You must become less for us to survive." Love says, "I want you to thrive without losing yourself." That's what Stoicism teaches. Real love is aligned with virtue, not in conflict with it. So what do you do if you're in a relationship where your values are on the chopping block? First, get clear. Name your values. What do you stand for? What are your non-negotiables? Honesty? Compassion? Growth? Spiritual connection? Integrity? Then ask, are these values being honored or quietly dismantled by this relationship? If they're being dismantled, you don't need more patience. You need a plan. A way to step back, to realign, and if needed, to walk away. That decision won't be easy. It may break your heart. But Stoicism isn't about what's easy. It's about what's right. And what's right is this. You do not exist to bend your identity to someone else's comfort. You exist to live a life of meaning, guided by principles you believe in. And anyone who truly deserves you will never ask you to give those up. So if you're facing that internal tug of war, if you feel like you're slowly dissolving into someone else's expectations, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to choose between being loved and being yourself. The right relationship won't ask you to pick. It will honor both. And if this relationship doesn't, then the most stoic, most courageous, most self-honoring thing you can do is step away, not out of hate, but out of deep love for who you are and who you're becoming. 11. Choosing virtue, choosing peace, the Stoic vision for healthy relationships. We've come a long way together through this journey, looking at the hidden red flags, the hard truths, the painful patterns. Now let's bring everything into focus. Because at the heart of it all, Stoicism isn't about isolation. It's not about shutting people out. It's about living in harmony with nature, with yourself, and with others. And that means choosing relationships that reflect virtue, not chaos. So let's ask the most important question of all. What does a healthy, meaningful relationship actually look like from a Stoic perspective? It's not perfect. It's not always easy. But it is aligned. It's rooted in respect. You're seen as a full human being, not as someone to fix, control, or manipulate. Your opinions matter. Your boundaries are honored. Your values are safe. It's built on reciprocity. Both people give. Both people grow. You're not the only one carrying the weight, initiating the conversations, or solving the problems. There's mutual effort, mutual care. It allows for peace. You can breathe. You don't have to overthink every word. You don't leave interactions exhausted or emotionally bruised. There's space for stillness, for ease, for calm. It encourages your growth. Not just tolerance, but true support. Your goals are not mocked. Your evolution is not feared. A Stoic relationship doesn't hold you back. It helps you rise. And most of all, it's based in truth. Not fantasy. Not potential. Not projection. But truth. You see each other as you are. You accept each other with clarity. You hold each other to high standards, not out of control, but out of mutual commitment to becoming better. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." That's the Stoic ideal. Not someone who entertains you, not someone who flatters you, but someone who helps you become more virtuous, more peaceful, more you. And what if you don't have that right now? What if you've realized that some of your current relationships don't align with that vision? Then take a deep breath. You don't need to cut everyone off today. You don't need to throw away years of connection without reflection. But you do need to start curating your inner circle like your life depends on it. Because it does. The people you let closest to you influence your mind, your choices, your values. The wrong relationships can quietly pull you off course. The right ones? They help you find your way back. So take stock. Reflect with courage. Does this person bring clarity or confusion? Do I feel safe or on guard? Do they challenge me toward virtue or tempt me away from it? Do I feel more myself or less when I'm with them than that? Maybe that means having a hard conversation. Maybe it means stepping back. Maybe it means saying goodbye with love, with gratitude, with peace. And know this, every time you choose alignment over attachment, you become freer, stronger, more peace. This is the Stoic path. Not the easy road, but the one that leads to a life of integrity, resilience, and deep joy. Because when you live in alignment with virtue, you don't just find better relationships, you become the kind of person who attracts them. Let's make that our goal, not just to avoid red flags, but to become beacons. To cultivate in ourselves the very qualities we seek in others. To live with clarity, courage, and compassion. And when the time comes to let go of a relationship that no longer serves you, let it be with strength, not bitterness. With love, not resentment. With wisdom, not fear. Because the Stoics didn't fear endings. They embraced them as part of nature, as part of life's flow. And they knew every ending clears space for a new beginning, one rooted in truth. So here's your invitation. Let go of what disturbs your peace. Let go of what violates your values. Let go of what keeps you stuck in illusion. And in that space, welcome relationships that reflect who you truly are and who you're becoming. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If you found this video valuable, please take a moment to subscribe, drop a comment with your reflections, and share this with someone who might need it. Your support keeps this message going. And if you're ready to go even deeper, check out the full Stoicism playlist right here on the channel. Together, we'll continue exploring the timeless wisdom that empowers us to live with grace, strength, and clarity. Until next time, remember, peace begins with truth, and the truth will always guide you home.